This is Gemara in Shekalim Daf Yod. All the learning for this month, the month of Nisan, has been sponsored Lili Nishmas Chaim Mordechai ben Naftali Tzvi by the Gruden family, the Neshama Shehav and Aliyah. Of course, all the Chaylim many of Meir Chaim and Sarsham Sivi Reisel Sarvas Gnendel Itabasiyam as Chaysay Yisol B'Mindel Yezer Peretz Ben Sharlei Shomas Nomi V'Shavfek V'Shiracham V'Al Davi Tiri V'Shmol and Tira Tnei Machan Reizim V'Chai V'Asmin Lebrachos Tavim Witza Dinayin V'Shin Mindel Simcha V'Tovia Ben Avigail Feshas V'Imen Fega Dvarim D'Chil Yisrael Nes L'Chil Yehuva Menachem Mendel Ben Toba B'Soy Shar Chali Yisrael as well as the Choshidach V'Atalea Basita Menachem Mendel Ben Elisheva. Mir Tashem, I hope tonight we will be back on the old schedule of everything being up a day earlier. And just a reminder, the shirim usually go up earlier on YouTube for those who need it time sensitive. We're picking it up on Testament Beis as you begin the fourth parak of Masechta Shekalim. Says the Mishnah, Hatruma. Says the Mishnah one more time. Hatruma ma hoya oisin ba. What would they do with the truma? Leichem ba tmidim umusafim min. They would buy with the truma. Again, what truma? We're talking about with the money that they take from the lishka. Again, we have from the beginning of the parak, it's been one big story. Beginning of the Masechta, I should say. We started with that they have to give the machzor shekel, when they have to give it, where they put it, when they take it out, how they take it out, how many times they take it out, the boxes they put to take it out. And now, what do they do after they take it out? They cover it over with the leather. What do they do with the leftovers? Now we have that as they take out that box number one, what would they do with it? So that truma, that separation they would take out, they would purchase with it the tmidim musafim and ischayim, basically all their karbanah yisibur, all the communal offerings and services that had to be done in the Beis Hamikdash every day. The time in the Musaf on the Yom Tovim and Shabbosim and in ischayim. And all the different libations. Now the Mishnah continues that as well the karban aimer, the shtei alechem on Shavuos, lechem aponim, the weekly showbreads, v'chol karbanos atzibur, and all the karbanos of the tzibur, those were all purchased with the money of the machzor hashekel. Now the Mishnah continues with a bit of a secondary din. Shoymrei svichen, those that would watch over the svichim. Svichim are aftergrowths after the Shemitah year. We know that during the Shemitah year you cannot plant, you cannot tend to the ground. Next year is a Shemitah year. This coming year, I should say, after Rosh Hashanah. So you cannot tend to the ground. The problem is they needed to have new wheat to purchase. They needed to have new grains, new wheats, barleys to bring the karban aimer and the shtei alechem. So how would they have that? So all the fields items would grow without tending to them. So that is the svichim, the aftergrowths. But in order to make sure that there was some left for these karbanos, they would guard the fields in order to make sure that there would be some of these items left. So Shoymrei Svichim Mishvias, the watchmen of these aftergrowths during Shemitah. Now, I'll just point out the question that all the Mefarshim deal with. We all know that the fields are hefker during Shemitah. So how are they allowed to watch it? If they're watching it, seemingly it's not hefker. And it's a good question, which we're not going to deal with right now. But the watching men of the aftergrowths of Shemitah, and the reason we're bringing this down here is because they would take their wages, the Beis Hamikdash, the Bezdin would pay them, and the money would come from the Chumas Alishka, from the machzor shekel. Rav Yosi Aimer Ava writes in Misnadiv Shemer Chinam. Says Rav Yosi, even someone who wants, he's allowed to work for free for the Beis Hamikdash. Now, it seems like a very simple statement of Rav Yosi, but really it's a bit of a loaded statement, which let's explain for one moment, because the Gemara is going to deal with it extensively. Basically, there's two questions that we have to deal with when one guards a field, these aftergrowths for the Beis Hamikdash. Number one, we have to deal with that when you watch something, let's say someone comes to take something from the field, and you stop him. Did you just make a kinyan on that which is in the field? How do you make a kinyan? Because you made a kinyan by not allowing someone to come in. That's question number one. Question number two is that if you did make a kinyan, who made the kinyan? You one person. And who does this grain, this wheat, this barley have to be owned by? The tzibur, the congregation at large, in order to bring the karban aimer and the karban shtei alechem. So the question is going to be that if we assume that you're going to make a kinyan, can then a singular person, a yachid, donate those products to the Beis Hamikdash to use for the karban tzibur? Now that is the machlekes here between the Tanakama and Rav Yosi. The Tanakama was concerned about out both of those items that we just spoke about, and therefore says the Tanakama, you have to pay the watchman, because then what happens if he's a watchman being paid by the tzibur, being paid by the Beis Hamikdash? Then even if he makes a kinyan, we're not worried, because who's the kinyan for? Who's the acquisition for? The tzibur at large. Whereas comes along Rav Yossi, says, no, I'm not concerned. A yachid could watch it. He could be a shemer chinam, an unpaid watchman, and you're telling me that wait, he might make a kinyan. Great, he'll make a kinyan, and then he'll give it to the Beis Hamikdash. He's not concerned with that, and we'll see more about that in the Gemara. Amrullah, so the Chacham said to Rav Yossi, Avata Omer, Shein Ba. You two have to also agree that it only comes the Omer and the Shtei Alechem as we turn over to today's Daf Yomi and Aleph, Nichel Tzibur. You have to agree it comes in the Tzibur, which of course, if Yossi is not disagreeing, Rav Yossi is just holding that you're allowed to give it to the tzibur, whereas the Chachamim disagree and they hold that once it would be acquired by a singular person, we'd be in a situation. Says the Gemara. What is the reason that there were 9 special families, 9 special dates, that the Kohanim would donate wood for the Mizbeach? Really, anyone could give whenever they want. So what exactly, we'll see why this is bringing in, it's going to have to do with that discussion we just said a moment ago between Rav Yossi and the Chachamim about a singular person donating towards the Beis HaMikdash, and it's going to be a raya. Actually, let's just foreshadow. It's going to be a raya to Rav Yossi, a raya to the opinion that a singular person could, yes, donate to the Beis HaMikdash. We're going to have 2 proofs to that. So the first proof is, says the Gemara, the Atik Kohanim, we know they donated wood to put on the Mizbeach. So the Brisa in Mesechtas Tainis discusses what is the reason, I should say better, I think, the Brisa, what is the reason that there were special groups of families and dates that they would bring this wood. Ella, so the Gemara explains what happened in history was B'shasha Ali Yisrael Menagayla, when Klal Yisrael came up from exile to Eretz Yisrael, which not even all of Klal Yisrael came from Bavel, V'lo matu eitzim b'lishka, and there wasn't any wood left in the chambers for the Mizbeach. V'amdu elu v'nisnadu eitzim, and these 9 families, which are discussed in the Mishnah and Tainis, these 9 families got up and they donated wood mishalatzman on their own, umasram letzibur, and they gave it over to the congregation, the karbamem karbanais, and with them they ought to use karbanais sibur of the congregation. Vehisnu imayim, and due to their generous deed that on their own they came and they gave the wood to the Beis Hamikdash, neviim shebeineihem shafilu Lishka Malaya Eitzim. So they decided that even in many latter years, says the Nevi'im, says the prophets, that even in latter years, that if the Mizbeach, the Lishka, was filled with wood, and they did not need wood, but yet, if one of these families would come and bring the wood, Eitzim Mishal Atzman of their own, Shleye Karvan, Miskarev El Mishalahen Tchila, that their wood were used first, because this family went on their own and took the initiative to bring wood when the Beis Hamikdash was in need. They got a special schos that for all eternity they are allowed to bring wood, they are able to bring wood in special dates, and their wood will always be used first. But what do we see from this brisa? We see from this brisa that clearly a singular person, these families, are able to donate something for the Beis Hamikdash. A clear raya to the opinion of Rav Yossi in the Mishnah that we're not concerned with a yachid not being able to donate something. A yachid could give something to the Beis Hamikdash for a karban sibur without any issues. Says the Gemara, no raya. Amar Avacham. The Rav Yossi, of course, Yerushalmi drops the yod, adds a hey. The Rav Yossi, so says Rav Acha, this is going with the opinion of Rav Yossi in our Mishnah, like we just explained. I'm sorry, I jumped the gun. This is explaining. The Rav Yossi Amar, Avaraitzim is not Dev Shemer Chinam. This fits with the opinion of Rav Yossi in the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, no, you don't have to say that. Rav Yossi b'shem Rav Eloi divrei Akali. Says the Gemara, really no, really it can be according to everyone, not only the opinion of Rav Yossi. Why? Ma beligin, what was the machlokes in the Mishnah is begufay shal karban. The machlokes in Chacham and Rav Yossi in the Mishnah, whether a singular person could donate something for the communal uses, is specifically by karbanos. Avo, but when it comes to one step removed, a step auxiliary b'machshir carbon, a secondary saying that services to the carbon, the wood on the mizbeach, everyone agrees that you're going to be allowed to give even from a singular person for the public, and therefore it's not a raya. Again, we want it to be a raya from the fact that we saw in the Braisa that a singular person, these families could donate wood for the Mizbeach for the public. Says the Gemara, it's not a raya to Rav Yosi because everyone would agree to machshiri, to auxiliary items. The whole machlek is Rav Yosi and the Chachamim were with the carbon itself. Says the Gemara, let's try again. A second raya. Tani, we learned Isha Sheisik Seinis Libana, the mother of a Kayin would make a shirt for her child, for a Kayin. Ksheira, she's allowed to make clothing for her son, the Kohen Gadol, to wear. Ubelvad Shem Tetzura LeSibur. Be careful, she has to give it over to the Tzibur. So what do we see? We see a clear raya again. Amar Ravacha to Rav Yosi. This is going with the opinion of Rav Yosi. Rav Yosi, Amar Rav Mistativ Shem Mechina. Another raya to Rav Yosi. We see that if someone wants, he's able to donate. The mother of the Kohen Gadol could donate the shirt to the public as long as she does it wholeheartedly. Says the Gemara, no. Rav Yosi b'Shem Rav Eloi Divrei HaKoli. Again, the same teretz really could be everyone. It's not only Rav Yosi. Ma Bligin Beguva Shel Carbon, the whole machlek is Rav Yosi the Chacham in the Mishnah was the carbon itself of a machshirei carbon, the auxiliary, the secondary item, the ancillary items of the carbon. Kolama Moidai Shu Meshanik Rabiyach carbon tzibur. So no raya. Says the Gemara, now we're going to ask a question on Rav Yosi. In those days, now actually, I should just point out, this line, what exactly the Gemara is about to do, is a massive machlekes. Is it a raya? Is it a kasha? Is it a statement? Literally every single person on the page, and off the page, actually, we're going to be going primarily with, I believe, the opinion of the Pnei Moshe, who's more on the page in the other Yerushalmi, is not in the Vilna Shas. But there's the Gemara, I'll bring you a question, Rav Yosi. Those days they would make a yomtiv whether they brought the carbon or not. The Gemara basically is saying that, and the Tanakama says that when they would bring the wood to the base of Mikdash, it would be a yomtiv. We know it's a yomtiv. We learned back in Pesachim, any day you bring a carbon is a yomtiv for you. So those families, when they would bring the wood to the base of Mikdash, they made a yomtiv. But the Tanakama held not only was it a yomtiv on the day they brought the carbon, but even Shaloi B'Shas Carbon, that for future generations, the date that family was able to bring wood to the Mizbeach, that date had a din of a yomtiv, even when they did not bring the wood. Rav Yosi Aimer, but says Rav Yosi, no. Eina Nahagin Ella B'Shas Carbon Bilvad. You only do it at the time of the carbon. So what do we see? We see that the din of Rav Yosi seemingly is only a din in the carbon, not a din in the Machshirei carbon. Meaning, the whole din of Rav Yosi in the Mishnah, that when Rav Yosi said that a singular person is able to donate to the Beis HaMikdash, the Gemara now is proving that it's only going to be a yomtiv when it to be for not like the Gemara just proposed, like Rav Yosi b'Shem Rav Eloi. That's why it's a little confusing because it's two Rav Yosis. But Rav Yosi b'Shem Rav Eloi kept on saying Divrei Akol, that it goes with everyone. Why? Because he differentiated between the carbon itself and the machshirei carbon, as we're highlighting over here, and previously, as the Gemara said a few lines earlier. But now the Gemara is explaining that no, Rav Yosi's din is a din specifically in the carbon and do not differentiate with the auxiliary items of the carbon. And similarly, bring a raya the Tanya Rav Elazar Rav Sadik. We're from the family of Sinna ben Binyamin. And that family of Sinna ben Binyamin, their date, says the Gemara in Tainis, was the 10th of Av, was the day they brought the wood to the Beis HaMikdash. And there was a year that Tishba fell on Shabbos. But the Chino said the Masay Shabbos. So of course we know that Tishba is pushed off until Sunday. And says Rav Sadik, we fasted, we did not complete the fast. Why not? Because it was a yontif. Why was it a yontif? It was a yontif because that was the day they generally brought the wood to the Beis HaMikdash. But again, we see from over here, this is not going to Rav Yosi that they made a yontif even on days they did not bring the carbon itself. Says the Gemara, continuing in the Mishnah, Ha'imher, Ushtei Alechem, the Mishnah taught us that all the Karbanei Sibur came from the Lishka with all from the Machsa Shekel. Says the Gemara, Taman Tanino, we learned over there, Kol Karbanas Ayachid, all private Karbanais, Ve'at Sibur, and public Karbanais, by Min Haaretz, U'min HaChotzarts. You let her bring it from animals both in Eretz Yisrael and in Chotzars. Min HaChadash Min HaYashan, for the new crop or the old crop, Chotz, except there was one exception. Min HaOimer, Shtei Alechem, Shin Boim, Elam Min HaChadash Min HaHaaretz. Those two karbanis had to bring number one brought from Eretz Yisrael and number two from the new grains, which of course is the reason why in the Mishnah they had to guard those fields to make sure they had new grains, which we'll see more about in a moment. Rav Chayna b'Shem Rav Yirmi of Rav Yishmaeli says Rav Chayna, this is going with the opinion of Rav Yishmael. The Rav Yishmael Aimer, Ina Aimer Ba Min Atzuria, that the Aimer cannot be from Syria, it has to be from Eretz Yisrael. Yisrael. So that's din number one, that the carbon aimer, the shtei alechem, had to be grain, new grain, and grain that comes from Eretz Yisrael, not outside Syria or anywhere else. Taman Tanin, we quote another Mishnah. As a Kedusha saying there were 10 holinesses, Eretz Yisrael, that Eretz Yisrael has above all other lands, umayi kedushasa, and what was the kedusha of Eretz Yisrael? Shemeviin mimena, oimer v'abikurim shtei alechem. Like we just saw, that these karbanos had to come specifically from the grains, the crops of Eretz Yisrael. Mashein kein meviin kein mikol haaretz, and they were not allowed to bring it from anywhere else, and that is the raya. So again, that which we just said, that the crops had to be specifically for the Armen and Shtei Alechem from Eretz Yisrael. Rav Chia b'shem Rav Yirmiyah, Rav Yishmael again explains, this is all going to the opinion of Rav Yishmael, that what? Rav Yishmael Aimer, Eina Aimer, Ba'minat Surya. It doesn't come from Surya, so two different prices concurring to the same detail, that the carbon Aimer and the Shtei Alechem had to be from nowhere else aside for crops in Eretz Yisrael. Taman Taninan, a third Mishnah, Rav Yishmael Aimer, Ma Charish Rishos, Av Kotzi Rishos. Says Rav Yishmael, just like Charish, there's never a mitzvah to plow. Charish, plowing, is the first of the avodas. Not avodas, malachas, which is forbidden on Shabbos. But there's never a case where you have to plow. Says Rav Yishmael, Av Katzir, so too reaping when it comes to cutting down the crops for the... We'll explain actually in a moment, let's not jump the gun. So too, reaping is also a rishos, it's never a mitzvah. Yotz, like says Rav Yishmael, that's in all other cases. But there's one time that the reaping, that the cutting of crops is a mitzvah. The cutting of the aimer shu mitzvah, which is a mitzvah, which again, this is bringing into the same detail. This is the third din that we're seeing about the aimer and the shtei alechem. Din number one had to be chadash, and number two had to be Eretz Yisrael. Din number three is that the cutting it down is a mitzvah. Explains the Gemara, Yishmael kedaiti der Yishmael, the Amar in Aimer Baminat Surya, that the Aimer only comes from, does not come from Surya. Kedaite da Amar Yotzik Sira Aimer Shu Mitzvah. That's where he got this din from, that it's a mitzvah. It's a secondary din. Din number one has to be Eretz Yisrael. Once we know it has to be Eretz Yisrael, there's a special mitzvah to cut down the crop. And of course, now we bring it all circle back into our Mishnah. Now we're discussing that the crop has to be new, has to be from Eretz Yisrael, and it's a mitzvah to cut it down. So now we can explain where they got the crop from in the year of Shemitah. So who is the Tana that said that that these watchmen of the aftergo the Shemitah not tzchar mitshuvas alishka? Again, it's going to be the same Rabbi Yishmael that holds it's a mitzvah to get this crop particularly, and that's the reason why they would hire a watchman in order to make sure they would have these crops left over for the shtei ha'omer, shtei alechem, and the carbon omer. Amar Rav Yosi divrei hakoli. He says no, it doesn't have to be only Rabbi Yishmael. Why? Because we thought it had to be only Rabbi Yishmael. Because why are they watching the land? Must be because it has to be a crop only from Eretz Yisrael. Concurring with Rabbi Yishmael, who also cannot be a crop from Syria. Explains the Gemara, no. You know why they were watching it? As a precautionary measure. Really, we could hold, you're allowed to bring it from Syria, not like Rabbi Yishmael. So why are they watching the crop if you could bring it from Syria? The answer is just in case there wasn't enough, in order to make sure they had some left over in Eretz Yisrael. Says the Gemara, a fascinating question. Ha'hein aimer, the crop for the carbon aimer, ma'u sheyizra b'tchila. Let's say you don't have any crop. You watch the field from the aftergrowth and there's nothing left. But now you have to bring the carbon aimer and the shtei alechem. Or you let it plant a crop for the carbon aimer, this during Shemitah, and it's a daraisa to plant. But of course, it's a mitzvah daraisa to bring the shtei aimer and the lechem upon him. Shtei aimer, and the carbon shtei alechem and the carbon aimer. So if that's a mitzvah, that's a mitzvah. Ask the Gemara, are you allowed to plant it? Says the Gemara, Rav Chia bar Ada, Bayikume Rav Mana, he came in front of Rav Mana, Lo nimsu kikaymetz al shirayim she'inach. He wanted to say, no, it's impossible. You know why? What's going to happen if you plant the crop, specifically for the carbon aimer? Then one of the processes they had to do by the carbon mincha is kamit. So they had to take the three fingers, knock off the top and the bottom, and then they would burn it. But the din of kamita is you're only allowed to do that if you eat the carbon. But if the carbon has nothing left to eat for whatever reason, it's possible you lost it, etc., you're not allowed to do the kamita, and then the whole mincha is puzzle. Says the Gemara, 1 second. In our case, why are you allowed to plant the crop? For the carbon aimer. Are you going to be allowed to eat the crop? Of course not. But then you're not going to be allowed to do the kamitza. If you can't do the kamitza, the carbon is puzzle. So says the Gemara, of course we see that there's no way you're going to be allowed to plant during Shemitah for the carbon aimer. Amar Le, he responded, no raya. I'll tell you, really, you would do the kamitza. There's a din in kamitza, you only can do a kamitza if you can eat the carbon? No. It's just like we have different dinim. Whenever there's a din of carbon sibur that you bring betama, which we dealt extensively in Psachim, chamisha dvarim that are born betama, and yet you don't eat them. And yet we see that the halacha is they have a din of a kosher carbon. So maybe that would be the same thing over here with the carbon haimer. Therefore, it's no raya. Maybe you could, yes, plant it. Says the Gemara back into our Mishnah, we don't really answer that question. But now we go back into the Mishnah. How do they pay the watchmen? Because you can't use the machzah shekels, which have kedusha. You can't pay the watchmen directly with them. So says the Gemara, no, you do. You go to a money changer, ask him for money, use that money to pay the watchmen, and then they use the money to pay the people who reap it and the people that watch the field until the carbon aimer is brought, and then and then after the carbon aimer is brought, then they'll bring the machzah shekel, and they'll take the kedusha of the machzah shekel, they'll transfer it to the carbon aimer, then they'll use those machzah shekel, those coins, to pay back the money changers. Says the Gemara, but Tabas Kain, is this accurate? Are they allowed to do that? The question being that the carbon aimer is worth significantly less amount than the amount that the watchman had to be paid. So how will you do this? It seems like a joke. Explains the Gemara. No, they would only pay the watchman not for all the wheat, because the problem was that the carbon aimer had X amount of flour, and then it was broken down until there was only a little bit of flour left. So they would only pay the watchman for that little quantity of flour, and therefore all the denominations equal each other. Tanana, similarly, just like those who hewed the stones, the base did the same. What would they do? And they would give it to the hewers, the saitim, those who chopped out the stones, the quarries. Actually, tinatein agabi adimas, before they even laid the last row of bricks. Mishnitin adimas. Then once the bricks were laid in the base of Mikdash, maybe Maz Mitchubas Alishka, they would take money machalav and they would consecrate onto the bricks, and then they would use that to pay back. But the boss came, could they do that? Says the Gemara, yes. If Yossi says that you could, the same taras, they would pay them in consonants the same amount, that which they gave to the same quantity that it was equal in of the stones. As we turn over to Yonam and Beis, we begin a new Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, or halacha beis, I should say more precisely. Para, v'sira mishtaleach, the para aduma, the sira mishtaleach, the goat that sent out on the Yom Kippur, the two goats, one la Azazel, which was the mishtaleach who was sent out, one was they brought to the Beis HaMikdash. Those animals, v'lashain shel zahiris, and the wet wool, all those items bought in Chumas Alishka, they would also come from the funds in the Chumas Alishka, from the machzah shekel. Says the Gemara, Keves para, they had a special ramp that they built all the way from the Beis HaMikdash to Har Azizim for the para aduma. That ramp, the Keves Yar Meshalech, similarly they had a ramp for the animal they sent away, and the strip of red that goes between the horns, and the aqueducts in the Beis HaMikdash, and the walls, the ear of the Yushalayim, Migdaleh, and the towers, and all the needs of the city. That's used for the leftovers. We know that there were the first separations, like we spoke with the last Mishnah. Now we have the second separations in this Mishnah. And then there were some times that there was leftover monies. The monies that were put underneath the leather coverings. So that money was used for all the other services, the walls and the towers and the ramps. That's what the money was used for. He argues and said, no, the ramp for the Para Aduma, each Kohen Gadol will build on his own from his own money, and he didn't use from the Machzah Shekel. The leftover of the Shiari Alishcha, what would they do with them? They would buy wines, oils, and flowers. They would sell it, and the money they got from the proceeds of those sales would be Divrei Rabbi Yishmael, would go to the Beis HaMikdash to fund any other projects the Beis HaMikdash needs. Rav Akiva Omer, no, we never gain on account of Hektish, so they would not sell these items. Neither from Aniyim, we'll see in the Gemara what that means. Moiser Achuma, what do we do? Those leftovers, but which we've seen already. It's used to coat the walls of the Kiddush HaKadoshim with gold. Rabbi Shmuel Omer Meiser HaPeiros is Kitzur Mizbeach, the leftover fruit is used for the dessert of the Mizbeach, which we've learned means that the Mizbeach would never be idle. Any time that there was no karbanos, they would bring karbanos on top of the Mizbeach. Meiser Truma Likli Shares, they would use for the different vessels in the Beis HaMikdash. Rabbi Kiva Omer Meiser Truma Liketz Mizbeach, that's what they use for the extra karbanos. I mean, it's Zachem Likli Shares. The leftover of the libations. Again, if they separated money, they had leftovers. Kitzur Mizbeach, Meiser Truma, Likli Sharis, Zevzel Lo Yamoidim Peiros, and they did not agree about the Peiros, which we're going to have to see what fruits are we discussing. Will be a discussion in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Keves HaPara. We learned in the Mishnah, the ram for the Para Aduma, the strip of wool that's tied between the horns. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman Mishem Rabbi Yonasan, Gimel L'Shaynes Heim. He explained that there were 3 strips of red wool for 3 different avodas, and each one had to have a different weight. They had the one for the seir, the one for the goat which they sent out. Bisela that was worth a weight of a sela. Shal Mitzaira that was used for the sprinkling onto the Mitzaira. That was Bishekel. Shal Para, one of the Para Aduma, Bishtei Slime had to be very heavy because it was burnt with the Para Aduma. And the pasuk when it's burning with the Para Aduma says, B'toich Srifas HaPara. And Toich means that's go inside. So they specifically wanted the wool to be heavy so that it could go all the way in to the fire while burning the Para Aduma. Rav Chonia, the Bras Chavron, Rav Chonia of a place called Bras Chavron, Rabbi Ba, Rav Zabda B'Shem, Rav Shimon ben Tchalavta, and he argued and he said, Shal Paras B'Shtei Slayim Umechs was 2.5. V'istamavkin Lishna b'Asar Zos, and some say no, it was worth 10 zos. So that's the different quantities and weights of this red wool that was used for different times in the Beis HaMikdash. We continue to the Mishnah. We learned about the Meiser Shiari Alishcha, the leftovers. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda b'Shem Rabbi Shmuel, Talmidei Chachamim Amalanim is like Kohanim. The Talmidei Chachamim that would teach like Kohanim, Hilchos Shlita, Hilchos Kabbalah, Hilchos Zrika, all the different avodas they had to do. The Talmidei Chachamim, the Rabbeim that would teach them how they get paid. They would also take their funds in the Chuvas Alishka. Just to point out the fact that the Gemara says the Hilchos Shchita is a bit difficult because Shchita is even kosher bizarre. Yisrael, maybe it's because it's only b'diavad by Yisrael. Either way, it says the Gemara, Rav Yitzchak bar Rediva b'shem Rabbi Imi mevakre mumei kachim. Now we're going to see all the different jobs in the Beis HaMikdash that took the money from the coins, the leftovers of the machzah shekels. So he learned to those who checked for the mumim in all the karbanos. Rav Acha, Rav Tanchum, Bar Chia, B'Shem Rav Simlai, Magi, Sefer Ezra, no, this Char Mitzvah Elisha, and the Magiim, those who checked the Sefer Torah, whether it means Sefer Ezra, referring to a specific Sefer Torah, whether it means all the checkers in general, but they would take their wages from the Lishka. Says Gemara, Gittel Bar Minyan, B'Shem Rav Asi, Shnei Diyan, Gzilais, no, this Char Mitzvah Elisha. There were 2 Batei Dinim, 2 Bezdins for different court cases, that they would take their money from the Chumas Alishka. Shmuel Amar Nashim Arregis bePareiches, the woman that wove the Pareiches no Neschar Chumas Alishka. Which Pareiches was this? This was in the second Beis HaMikdash. Instead of a wall, it was too tall. They had 2 Pareiches, but that's where a woman wove it, and they would get paid from the Chumas Alishka. Rav Chayna Amar Michumas Bedek Abayis. He argues on this last din, and he says that the woman really paid for the Bedek Abayis funds, but not necessarily different avdavos, different donations, but not necessarily from the Machzah shekel. Ma polik. What is the machlekes over here? Shmuel avad Allah ki karban, Ravuna avad Allah ki binyan. The machlekes whether the woman took the wages from the Chumas Alishka, the Machzah shekel, or from the Bedek Abayis. Shmuel says it came from the Bedek Abayis. The reason being, Shmuel says it comes from the Chumas Alishka because Shmuel says it's din of a carbon, these curtains, whereas Rav Huna held no, it's din of the building, the Beis HaMikdash itself, so it came from the Bedek Abayis. Amar Rav Chizkiya Tana Rav Yehuda Tana Rav Yehuda Gadgudus, that was his name. HaKetayres Chol Karbanis at Tzibur Ba Mi Chumas Alishka, to pay for the Ketayres and all the other Karbanis came to the Chumas Alishka. Mizbeis Azav Chol Kli Shars Ba Mi Meiser Nisachim came from the leftovers of all the Nisachim. Mizbeis from leftovers of the Machzah shekel, Chotz Lazarais, except for Lazarais Bain Mi Shiari Alishka, except for the places of the walls of the Chotzer that came from the remainders of the Lishka, remainders of the remainders of the lishka. Bedek habayis. So this word bedek habayis is a little bit difficult over here. The Gaino takes it out. He learns that it does this chutz lazaris ba'in mushiari alishka, or maybe it means bedek habayis. That's a bit of machlekes in the gersayis, and we're going to conclude with the Gemara asking a question. But we learned that all these items, all the kilim beis hamikdash have dinah meila. Chayish meila b'shiarim. But if you're paying from the shiarim, the leftovers is no dinah meila. Answers the Gemara, opinion that we've seen is Rameir, Krameir, Rameir, Oimer. Mayalim, Bishiarim, Rameir held that no, there is a din meila even on the leftovers, and we're going to pick up from, actually, let's just learn one more line. Amar Avchia, Klomar, Rameir, El B'teich, Shanasai, that was only in the first year. But here it's talking about the items that be submitted, which is after the first year of the leftovers. Vachot Shanasai, not Kaminan. Amar Avcheskia, Tan Rav Yehuda, Gedani, Yeshalchim, Amneira, Vamizbeach, these Kalim, Abrechs, Makvin, is Karbanais, they were Rameir, and Chacham, Maimrim, Inducham, Akiv, is a carbon, El Akir, Vakin, Balvad. Okay, we'll learn these last few lines. We'll pick up from there tomorrow.